Hi, everyone. Dr. Tim here with Hillary for another session of the Dr. Tim's Aquatics podcast.
It is holiday season, though, so we are going to talk about aquariums, past, present, and future. I'm going to throw you under the bus a little bit. Dr. Tim has been around keeping aquariums for quite a bit longer than I have and can tell us about how things were a while back. And we even have pictures of his first aquarium. And I'm going to put that in the slides so that you guys can see it and comment. Let us know what you think of it. And so we're going to talk about how things used to be, how they are now, and then maybe what we expect to see in the future.
Thanks, Hillary.
I was trying to be as nice as possible.
That's okay. It's experience, like a fine bottle of wine. Mm-hmm.
There you go.
I just haven't mellowed with age. But
I would say, yeah, like you do dad jokes every Monday. That's pretty mellow. Dad jokes and Hawaiian shirt. Just saying.
Well, I've had Hawaiian shirts a long, long time too. So we're all vintage. But I got my first aquarium when I was 6 years old. And that was the start of all this. I won 2 goldfish at a elementary school fair. Took them home. Found I don't know why there was a fishbowl under the sink. I just remember this. Took a bunch of soap and cleaned that fishbowl up, filled it full of water, and the next morning the fish were dead as doornails.
Oh no. Oh no.
Yeah. And so I was rather unhappy, and my mom called my uncle, and he was a very well-known dentist, and he had aquariums in his office, and he brought me over an aquarium and showed me how to set it up and told me all the stuff I had to do. And as they say, the rest is history. That's my first aquarium. Still have it right here in the office.
That's pretty cool.
You'll see the picture of Pemco, slate bottom, tar in the corners. And at that time, it was revolutionary because we used undergravel filters. Do you know what an undergravel filter is, Hillary?
I've heard of undergravel filters. I can't say that I've ever actually seen one.
Just like the old rotary phones, huh? Now we're going back.
I haven't seen and used those.
You have or have not?
No, I have.
Okay. In a hotel somewhere in the back country, huh? Anyways, this is a 29-gallon skinny tank. I think front to back the tank is, I know it's not a foot. It could be as skinny as 8 inches, maybe 10 inches. Back then, nobody knew about the nitrogen cycle. I've looked for references. I did an article on this, and I've tried to find articles when they start talking about nitrifying bacteria and stuff, and that really didn't come into till later, the late 60s, early 70s. We're talking a little before then, and so my uncle, what he told me to do is you had these orange. I've got them somewhere. These orange undergravel filters. So the plate, this plastic plate that goes on in the tank first, and these skinny lift tubes in the corners. The lift tubes are literally 3/8 inch. Just skinny. And you put the gravel on top of that, and add dechlor. That's what it was called, dechlor. And he said every month you have to take the gravel out, rinse it really well, and then put it back in. Now, of course.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot.
So every month I'd have 2 buckets. I'd take some water out and I'd capture all the fish and I'd put them in the water in one bucket. and keep the dogs away because the dogs were like bobbing for apples. They'd try to catch the fish in the bucket, and then take a hose or tube and siphon out all the gravel, take it out to the backyard and the hose and rinse the gravel out really well till it's clean out the tank until it's spotless, and then set it all up again. So basically, as you can probably guess, is every month I'm destroying the nitrifying bacteria.
No kidding. Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. But that's what you're supposed to, that's what I was told to do, was clean that thing. And the revolution, if and I have a book, these what were they called? The original undergravel filter was designed by a company in Long Beach, California. Miracle Filter, Miracle Flow, or something like that. And there's a book, and if I have it, it talks about how it's so revolutionary that the undergravel filter, and I've got to maybe explain this. So you have this plate on the bottom, you put the gravel on top, and then you have an air hose, an air pump that connects to the lift tube, and you bubble air into one tube, and a skinny little tube, and it goes under the gravel filter and then up the lift tube, and that creates a water flow. The water flows through the gravel, and that brings the oxygen. Now we know what it's doing. It brings the oxygen in contact, the water and oxygen in the water in contact with the gravel. The bacteria live there, and it circulates. And undergravel filters were super popular for 40 years. You and I joined Marineland. I remember undergravel filters were quite popular. And this book talks about how they're so good that they actually trap ick and disease organisms. The downward flow of the water traps the disease organisms in the gravel. Now we know that's all BS, but it sounds great. That was nobody knew about bacteria. You weren't educated. You go to the store and they didn't talk to you about nitrifying bacteria or anything else until later. And the thread of why, past, present, and future is really increased knowledge and improved technology that we have, because you had an air pump, hasn't changed much on those, the lift tube and the undergravel filter, and then that was it. And then came the hang on the tank filters, but they worked differently in that once the pads clogged, the filter would lose suction, and you'd have this slurping sound, which would drive your family crazy because the filter boxes run out of water. Nowadays, the hang-on tank filters are different in that they have bypass, so they never run out of water. You don't have, and they're self-priming. The ones in the beginning ones, there was different ways of trying to get them to prime, where you had to fill the lift tube with water, put your finger over both ends. So both hands are in the water here, and put one end in the filter box, one end in the tank to get the filter going and get the suction going. It was a lot of fun. You interacted a lot more with your tank in those days.
Sounds like a lot of work. It's amazing that there's a hobby now, if that's what they had to go through.
Oh, yeah, it was. And the filters had the spun wool in there. You cleaned that, but nobody really talked about biomedia or anything like that. And we kept fish alive. It was fine. Lighting was fluorescent tube or incandescent tube, and there were no safety features. I'm surprised I didn't electrocute myself as a kid when I think back on it. But the
Wow.
lighting was basically a shop light. Or then we got the Grolux. That was, these special kind of pinkish fluorescent lamps that were over the tank. And I mean, it looked fine. And we kept a variety of fish alive in spite of our lack of knowledge.
Okay, I'm going to pause you right there. So, right now, I feel like especially in freshwater, I feel like there's a fairly large variety of fish that you can find. How does now compare to back then?
Well, the fish were better back then. They were when you went to the store, the fish were healthier. They were bigger. We had a wide variety, not as big as now. Now you've got fish from all over, but we had a lot of nice fish. Of course, you had discus and angelfish, and all sorts of tetras and barbs and algae eaters and zebra danios. There was a quite a wide variety of fish then. I don't think we didn't have a bunch of the Plecostomus, now that you have, but we had one or two. So the fish were kind of the same. And I would say these days, fish are smaller at the store. I think the quality of fish was actually, if I was being honest, was better back then.
Why do you think that was?
I think now there's just pressure on the fish farms to produce a lot of fish and get them out. There were one of the bigger department stores, Woolworths, a place called Sages. I can remember they had fish in those stores. It's kind of like you went down to Macy's and there was a fish department.
What?
Yeah.
Wait, so was there
no, but not Macy's.
Petco and PetSmart
did not exist.
Didn't exist. But so that's where what you would consider your fish store or your pet store?
Yeah. Fish store. Yeah.
Fish store.
Fish store. Definitely a fish store. Woolworths. Oh yeah. Woolworths,
Wow.
a place called Sages. And there was a couple of aquarium stores, but after a while the owners were like, "Kid, get out of here. You're bugging me," because you kind of live there.
We all do. I feel like at some point when you're first learning,
Yeah.
that kid has another question.
Yeah, another question. Get out of here, kid. You're bugging me. You don't have any money anyways, right?
Okay, so you've been to Europe. I was in Interzoo and we stopped. I feel like it was a big, I don't know, kind of like Home Depot, but I think they had more stuff and they had a whole fish department in that store. Would you say that it's maybe something like that? Or are you familiar with that?
Well, you're not talking about Zoo J-Jack. That's all they do is sell animals. It's a
no. This was we went there for a Home Depot. We were trying to find tape or I don't know something for our booth, and I was like, "Oh, look, there's fish."
Yeah, it was like that. But Woolworths, you could get everything, but they had a fish department. Sages, you could get everything too. Yeah, you go to Japan these days and literally go to the department store and go to the top floor. You can go out on the roof, and the top floor is the fish section, and they have $100,000 arowanas there. Here, put this on my Macy's charge card and get that.
That's wild.
I mean, Pier 1 Imports, which wasn't, that later on, Pier 1, they had fish. Yeah.
Really? Okay,
Yeah.
This is just blowing my mind.
Oh yeah, Pier 1 Airport Imports had a big fish selection. Well,
that's crazy.
The late Bob Fenner was responsible for that. He was importing and setting up fish at Pier 1 Imports, Southern California.
No way.
Yeah.
That's cool. I got a side note about Bob Fenner. He was one of the first people, I can remember when I was a new hobbyist, Wet Web Media was the website. I think they still have it, but that was my go-to resource trying to figure out what was going on in my tank when the forums all steered me wrong. I have very fond memories of him being super helpful.
Not Bob was always super. I mean, he and I went to school together at San Diego State.
I did not know that. I learn something new every time we talk.
Yeah, no, we were both undergraduates at San Diego State studying biology and chasing, biology. That's what we were doing. San Diego. So we definitely had good times then, a long time ago. So, I watched him grow, and he had a couple of those stores, did a lot of different things. Was a great guy.
Yeah, he was.
But we didn't know a lot. And then funny story, I set up eventually a few years later, this bacteria product came out, and it was supposed to help you set up your tank. And then you started getting test kits. And I bought the stuff, with my money mowing lawns and stuff like that, and tested it because I had a chemistry set and test kits, and I was, junior Jacques Cousteau here in this garage and house with aquariums. Yeah, picture that. And but anyways, the stuff didn't work, didn't cycle, didn't do anything for the ammonia, and it's a well-known company these days. And I have the letter I wrote to them asking for my money back. They gave me my money back.
I can picture it.
About 13 years old, asking for my money back because your stuff is no good. It didn't cycle.
Oh, funny.
Yeah. But go ahead.
Well, no, I was just saying they're still around today.
Oh, they're still around today. Yep. The equipment was, I remember the first protein skimmer I ever got was the Sanders protein skimmer. And there is nothing wrong to this day with that protein skimmer.
It still works.
Yeah. And as you've heard me 1.5 million times, people tend to overskim, get a bigger skimmer, get this, get that, all this stuff. We now know that overskimming leads to more problems. I think it leads to a lot of problems in most people's tanks. We try to keep the water too clean. I don't care where you dive. The water is not, gin clean. The Sanders skimmer works fine. It gets out the organic, enough of the organics and keeps things clean. And we had the common problems. I don't remember having dinoflagellates. We had cyanobacteria, that's for sure, and algae. But we didn't have much knowledge of lights. Lights were basically, you had shop lights and grow lights, at that time. Grow-Lux lights, which of course grow algae as well as they grow plants.
Of course.
Yeah. But I mean, nowadays a freshwater tank and a marine tank, I think, are much different in terms of the equipment you have. At that time, you used pretty much the same equipment for a freshwater tank as a saltwater tank. Now, when you get to the fish, we didn't really have corals, and fish were relatively limited at that time. I think I had my first saltwater tank when I was 14 or 15 because it was expensive then. But
it's expensive now.
Yeah.
Nothing has changed.
Nothing has changed.
So what was your first saltwater fish?
Oh, panther grouper. I've always loved the panther groupers.
That was the first one you kept?
Yep, panther groupers, lionfish, and arc-eyed hawkfish. Yep.
Okay.
Those are my go-to. I did really, those are all hardy fish too. Luckily, I didn't lose too many fish because people tried to keep others, but we didn't know much about the feeding. There weren't a ton of books at that time. You had a couple of magazines. They came out monthly, and you devour those, trying to get information. But you didn't have the internet, which is good and it's bad. You can ask questions, but you get 100 answers, and you get 100 different answers these days. So how do you know which one is correct? Back then, a lot of trial and error. Yeah,
I can only imagine. So what are, and I don't want to call out different brands, but what are some brands that you remember being around that are still around today? What were your go-to? I'm sure we all have our go-to stuff. Not to say that that's something that you sponsor, but I think it's interesting to see companies that have. You
had Tetra, which is around in one way or another. Marineland. I mean, I had Marineland filters before I ever worked for Marineland.
Oh, that's cool.
And since I still have some of those, well, the Whisper, Second Nature was absorbed by Tetra. I'm not sure if they're still around, but that was a well-known brand. Hagen, Hagen's been around for a long, long time. And then Aquarium Systems. At that time, Instant Ocean was kind of the only salt, I think, and that's what you used.
Oh, I will just say that Instant Ocean is my go-to salt for now.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Those were the kind of the standard ones. We didn't really have the wide variety of skimmers. Obviously, didn't have LED lighting. That it was incandescent, then it went to fluorescent, and then it went to high output and very high output, so HO and VHO, because it started to learn intensity to get what we now know is you're trying to get the par. But then the real switch, it was almost a switch, was and somebody will say I'm wrong on the year, and I probably am, but we've progressed now. I'm not a little kid anymore, but we're into the 80s and started using the actinic lights, and that's when you were able to start keeping corals alive for much longer, and actually they started to grow, not just keep them alive. And the actinic lights, of course, had the blue wavelength, and that was what the corals needed. It wasn't so much you needed this high intensity, you needed it in the right wavelength. But that all took, knowledge. The knowledge has expanded, the science has expanded over time, and that's been one really fun to watch. And if I guess I'll give myself a little pat on the back, contribute in my way into that. It's kind of why I got into what I got into, because I liked science and I liked aquariums, and it kind of meshed. So we now know a lot more about what it takes to sustain a closed aquatic system. I wouldn't call it an ecosystem. We're getting closer and closer, but the ecosystem, you need the bacteria, and we tend to eliminate the bacteria unintentionally and things like that. But we're getting more knowledgeable. People are starting to appreciate the importance of bacteria.
Oh yeah, of course. I'm going to take a step back. You were talking about corals and keeping them alive and stuff. It's interesting. This past year at Magna, I think Michael Paletta was the guy that gave the speech at dinner. And one of the things that really interested me is he kind of did the same thing and talked about how aquarium keeping has come along. And he had photos of some of the first corals that he kept. And I got to tell you, those are some of the ugliest looking corals. So I don't know if Magna posts these videos, but if they do, you should try and go back to look at them.
Yeah. Oh, the colors and the varieties of corals are amazing today, and what people can do, and knowledge about flows and seawater makeup, lighting is all. It's just amazing what we're doing these days. And there's really no reason. Yeah, it's expensive, but let's look at some of these dogs and cats people keep. They're not cheap either. So if you're going to make the investment to keep the animals, you need to get the right equipment, and there's no reason not to. The knowledge is there at the present time, not to keep everything alive, and we shouldn't keep everything in captivity. But you can definitely we've got captive bred fish. That was unheard of for saltwater fish. The originals were, the clownfish that were done by Martin Moe out in Florida. And then a group came over to SeaWorld in San Diego to work on that. had success and failure, and failure's 90% of science, and you learn about that, and 90% of industry. You learn from it and grow. And now every day, what was it? Quality Marine just announced the purple tank, I
Purple
think.
tanks?
Yeah, the purple tank, which 10 years ago people would have said you're nuts. But there's a lot of companies and people putting a lot of time and effort into the captive bred, which is great and corals, fragging and things like that. So that's been a really nice advance that we have.
Yeah. Part of me too wonders, I mentioned how ugly the corals were, but I wonder if they were just as beautiful as they are now, but we just didn't know how to take care of them and have the right lights and the right equipment that, we would have seen all that.
The corals haven't changed. Yeah. It's not like we got rid of all the ugly corals. No, our equipment made them ugly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But now we just have so much more knowledge and better equipment, and things have gotten smaller and much more energy efficient. I mean, look at a little shameless plug, but the stuff we're introducing now from ASF in Europe, with using a third of the electricity for then or the wave makers and the pumps and things like that, DC pumps. I mean, there's a wide variety of improvements, and you look into the future, energy efficiency, controlling systems, feedback systems, so that you can get be warned of what's going on, backup systems, increased improvements in lighting, LED lighting. Even it's not been 5 years. People would say you couldn't keep corals with LEDs. I'm sure you've heard that many times, Hillary.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and yeah, you can't keep every coral with LEDs, but every day LEDs are getting better and better. And I remember people had the metal halides. The metal halides, your electric bill, the meter was spinning off the wall, and you had to have air conditioning in your house and refrigeration on your tank because it generated so much heat.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, the electric bills, and burn your house down with those things. But so that's, looking ahead, this is what I know is happening because we're part of that, where smaller, more efficient equipment, better systems based on science and physics, and now bacteria, which of course is, as Dr. Tim's Aquatics, our forte, what we really specialize in. And now everybody's jumping on that bandwagon, but we've been on that for Dr. Tim 16 years and myself for 20 years. It's really the secret to the whole thing. And now with the genomics and the sequencing that we can do with the biogenome, we can actually start to learn. And what you see all the time is the marketing gets ahead of the science, if I can say that politely. And so, folks, you're going to see all sorts of companies out there and mixes and promising this and promising that. And just beware. When there's a new technology, everybody jumps in and they're all the experts. Just evaluate the companies you're looking at and the products you're buying. Are they designed by scientists, or are they designed by business people out for the short term? That goes back all the time. I remember, since we're reminiscing, right, Hillary?
Exactly.
Yeah. There was a magazine, Freshwater and Marine Aquarium, FAMA, and they're pretty industry friendly. But they wrote one review, and it was about this product, and it was supposed to, magically cure your fish. You just placed it in the tank and it got rid of all the diseases. And they took it apart.
What?
Oh yeah. Well, it was a kitchen, it was a kitchen, not a sponge, but the squeegee, the little round made out of plastic, fiber, I don't know, kitchen scrubber, right?
Yeah.
And in the middle of the kitchen scrubber thing, they had put a couple of copper pennies.
No.
Oh yeah, that's the product.
No.
Oh yeah. They took it
Oh my
apart.
gosh.
Right. So you're paying, like 15, I don't know what the price was, but you're paying a lot of money for a kitchen scrubber pad with a couple of pennies in the middle that are copper, that are going to dissolve copper into your tank supposedly.
Oh my
yeah.
goodness.
Oh yeah.
It's crazy though. Stuff like that like, oh, this is great. But now we looking back, you're like, oh no, that's a terrible idea.
Yeah, that's a terrible idea. I know magnets were big for a while. And I went to a talk this was at a Magna, I think. And the guy's selling these magnets that, were a fortune you wrapped around your hoses, return hoses. How about how magnets kill bacteria? It's like, what?
Wow.
Yeah. Magnets don't kill bacteria, people. There's actually magnetic, and it's pretty cool that if you have a decent microscope, you can see this. You don't have to even, have a 400 power. This works at 1,000x. It really, works. But if you go to a slough, a estuary, just any, bay, right on the edge there by the mud, scoop up some water, and it usually works. But you can find these magnetotactic bacteria, and you put it under the scope and you're looking at it, and then you put a magnet by the cover slip, and you could actually get the bacteria to be attracted to the magnet. And then you can slowly move the magnet and the bacteria will move with the magnet.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. So something to do when you're thawed out right there, Hillary. Right. When you're last week, when you were doing your
when it was super cold, I was live streaming.
I was waiting for you, like, how are you going to drop that phone in the water, and what are you going to do with it now?
Oh, I don't even I'd have to go get my dive gear and go get my phone.
You got to get a holder or something so that
I know.
That's all I worried about was that Hillary was going to drop. She was going to fall in the water. What we're talking about, folks, is Hillary's doing this live podcast from a boat dock last weekend. It's really interesting. You should catch it. Is there a name to this?
No, just live streaming. Usually it's on Saturdays.
And she's looking at nudibranchs, and then there's a jellyfish there, and I'm thinking she's just going to drop this phone into the drink, and it's about 4 degrees Celsius. Sorry.
Yeah.
The water. Well, the air too.
Air temperature was pretty cold too.
Yeah. Anyways, I interrupted. What were you saying?
Oh, I don't know. Oh, I know. I was going to ask you about heaters. I feel like one thing that I've always struggled with is getting good, reliable heaters. What kind of heaters existed? Have heaters changed at all? I feel like they're still almost as unreliable as they've ever been.
Yes, they were unreliable then because they all use the bimetal one, that eventually, so what happens is you have this circuit and there's these two pieces of different metals, and as the water changes temperature, the metals contract or expand, and when they expand, the two pieces of metal meet, and that completes the circuit, and then that starts heating up the heater element. And what happens is eventually those two pieces of metal solder together, they just stick. And that's when the heater never shuts off and your tank turns to bouillabaisse. And that is the same technology used today. And the reason is, are there better systems? Yes, but they're more expensive. And people just won't pay the money, which to me, and folks, we don't have heaters. yet. No, we don't have heaters. So it's not like I'm pushing our heaters that we don't have. But you have this beautiful aquarium and you have all this money and you take and buy the cheapest heater you can find because it's $10, where a quality digital heater, yeah, it's $70, maybe more. But you run no risk of cooking your tank. You run no risk of the heater exploding. All the problems with heaters, the fix is there. It's just people will not pay the money, so companies just don't. I mean, these things have launched in Europe. They're here in the U.S. They don't sell because people look and they go, "A heater's a heater. I'm going to get the $10 one, not the $70 one," and they don't think about the consequences. So.
Yep. I've been around far too many times where heaters either gotten electrocuted by heaters or heaters have wiped out tanks or crashed or broken or almost burned houses down.
Yeah. There's two. I mean, the heaters have burned houses down.
Yeah.
We get that all the time. And it's like, we don't make heaters, folks, so you can't sue us. Wasn't our heater. But the two things that I would never go cheap on, heater and lights. Especially, if you're keeping corals and things like that, you have to have lights. And the heater's just that thing that if it fails, it doesn't fail and nothing happens. It fails and your tank is wiped out.
Yep.
I mean, what other, if your pump fails, it stops. You've got some time to catch, unless your tank is really overstocked or something like that. You have time and you'll get home and you'll know, something's wrong with the water's not moving or something like that. And you could say, well, you can have an alarm system, but not everybody has, an alarm, a temperature alarm system on their tank. They just have a nice tank. And then they don't realize it until their fish have bleached out and they're cooking and they're all dead, that the heater's stuck together. We get this all the time. I had a tank wipe out because the heater stuck and cooked my fish. So the one,
Yep.
I mean, Hillary, I'm open to other pieces of equipment, but the heater is that one piece of equipment that I would not go cheap on.
You and I are in absolute agreement on that. I just got the heater for my new tank and I spent a pretty penny on it, but it's a titanium one and I'm hopeful that it will be good.
Yeah. Word to the wise there. And as we go forward, because I've been rambling for a little bit of time and you asked, what about the future? The future is better equipment at less expensive pricing, hopefully. The current situation, with the supply chain and everything, prices are expensive, but that should come down. Shipping is a huge part. Containers from Europe or from China, just any of the shipping nowadays, it doesn't have to be finished goods. Just raw products is it up 5-6 times. A container that used to cost $3,500 at the height of COVID was $27,000.
Holy cow.
Oh yeah. Now it's come down to between 10 and 14, but that's still 2.5 times what it used to be. So it's just that will come down hopefully, and things will stabilize. But more energy efficient. People maybe I like technology and the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and stuff. I'm old fashioned. I think you should be able to look at your fish. You interact with your fish. If you want Bluetooth, get a computer or something. But salt water and electronics has never mixed, never will. And we tend to rely on it. It becomes a crutch. Well, I didn't pay attention much to my tank or anything because I got all this equipment on it. And then, probes get stuck. Salt water corrodes things. To me, the whole idea of having a fish tank has always been to have something living and beautiful in your house. And you got to look at it, and that's the whole purpose, to relax you and pay attention to it and just look at it instead of staring at your phone.
Yes, exactly.
That sound old and crotchety.
No, it's funny. It's funny that you brought that up because that was what I was going to ask is like, do you think things are going to go more automated and, all of these apps? I feel like I'm scared that things are going that way, but I'm hopeful that there's enough people out there like you and I that like to, manually do things and to enjoy their tank, not just like parameters that are, pulled up on an app.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with the app and the parameters as long as it's used to me as a tool and not a crutch. You still need to look at your fish, feed your fish, interact with your fish, the corals, all that type of stuff. It tells you a lot. We get this all the time with the questions. My tank is perfect, but everything's dead. Well, obviously something wasn't perfect. So I don't know, and usually it doesn't happen instantaneously. Yeah, sometimes. So, what were you doing? What were you looking, paying attention? I just think people need to get away from looking in the phone, looking in the app, looking in the LED readout and look at the tank, because if your fish start clamping up, if your corals aren't expanding, if your fish are shimmying in the corner, that's the early sign that something's going wrong. You don't need a meter to tell you. The fish and the animals are telling you. And that will never change.
Exactly. It's interesting. I was talking to somebody and they were talking about one of the species of wrasses, that it's a captive bred species, and that they had tried everything. They'd watched trying to make sure that the numbers are right. Like everything was dialed in perfectly. And at the end of the day, what it came down to, it wasn't anything like digital. It was like they didn't have sand, like the right kind of sand or something in the tank. And that's something I feel like, a readout is never going to tell you. Like that's something that you have to observe, that like it's the human component of all of this. And I think that as we're keeping the tanks, hopefully that should always stay and be there. And be the driving force.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to have, a piece of nature. I remember years ago when people came out with the flat screen television, with looks like an aquarium. Oh, that's going to replace fish. I don't think so. People like to have fish, real corals. It's just absolutely gorgeous. And these days, the colors and the variety is it's just amazing, the tanks that you see and the fish and the colors and all that you can replicate in your house. And in the future, I think it'll be more knowledgeable. I won't say easier, but the knowledge will be there so that you can have success, but you're still going to have to dedicate a little time and effort to it. It's not going to be automatic. And I don't think it should be. That's part of the fun. Just put your phone down and get your hands wet.
Exactly. Yep. I don't know. How much time do we have left? I feel like I could talk about this topic for days.
Well, I thought you were keeping care of the track of time.
I got lost in time. When you're having fun.
I like this kind of reminiscing and try to get you some pictures of things, or maybe another one, little slideshow. I've got lots of pictures somewhere.
Yes. We like pictures.
Yeah. We'll get that app where we can take me out of the picture. So.
Half of the fun is you being in the photos.
Yeah. See how big my beard is over the years, right? I think we've had that time. It's probably,
yeah. Well, if you've enjoyed this and you want to hear more conversations like this, we are always open to continuing and making a part 2 on this. Let us know, as always, what you want to hear about, and we'll try and make that happen.
Thank you, everybody. This has been Dr. Tim and Hillary with another session of Dr. Tim's Aquatics Podcast. Good fish keeping.